The United Nations will convene its first ever World Humanitarian Summit, gathering hundreds of governments, NGOs, aid agencies, and civil society groups. The goal of the summit, put simply, is to make sure the humanitarian system can keep up with the growing needs. Stakeholders will try to come up with a way to build a more sustainable response, rather than pivoting from crisis to crisis, always one step behind. That's a big remit for a two-day summit. And already there are concerns from some corners that the WHS won't be able to deliver. Médecins Sans Frontières made headlines earlier this month by pulling out of the summit, saying they had no confidence the goals could be achieved. Others who are still engaged admit it won't be easy, but one has to start somewhere. Taking place in Istanbul, the summit's location will certainly be a reminder of the need. Turkey is at the center of one of the most profound global refugee crises in recent times and is currently hosting an estimated 2.7 million Syrians. So what does fixing the humanitarian system mean, and what can we expect in Istanbul? First and foremost, the WHS will be about funding. Humanitarian relief needs more of it. But advocates for reform also say the money needs to be more flexible, quicker to arrive, and less tied to politics. The UN has been brainstorming ways to get this done, and a report released by the Secretary General's office in January has suggested a grand bargain between donors and aid groups to be struck at the summit. The other half of the funding question is about getting more bang for our buck, by opening up the aid system to some players who have been traditionally left on the sidelines. First, that's the private sector. Whether that means getting shipping companies to send aid convoys, tech firms providing Wi-Fi in refugee camps, the World Humanitarian Summit will try to recruit everyone to do their part. Also at the head table for the first time will be a multitude of local and national NGOs. These groups often have lower overhead costs and better local know-how than international providers. The summit will urge more funding to go directly to them. And finally, there's the question of what type of relief is the most effective. Studies have started to show that cash assistance is the most beneficial to refugees, but many donors are still reluctant, and more than 90% of aid still comes in kind, in the form of stuff. The summit will push donors and providers to think about efficiency and effectiveness first. The other big challenge looming over the summit is the political context. War and conflict are the main drivers of displacement and need. The UN Secretary General, as well as countless stakeholder organizations, will be pushing for greater political will to end ongoing conflicts, and for armed actors to respect international humanitarian law where war is a reality. All eyes will be on the government delegations in Istanbul to see who is showing up and what they're promising. So far, around 50 world leaders are expected to come, the highest profile of which may be Germany's Angela Merkel, a leading voice for Europe to accept more of the refugees seeking asylum on the continent. Still, the reality is that even if every country and every actor lays out groundbreaking commitments, the humanitarian system is likely to be stretched for a significant time to come. Devex will be on the ground in Istanbul May 23rd and 24th. Here are a few things that we'll be watching specifically. First, we'll ask what the summit means for the private sector and what's the business case for being involved in humanitarian relief. Innovation is also reshaping the humanitarian sector, well outside the remit of any formal negotiations. And finally, a host of global issues call the humanitarian sector into play. Climate change may lead to new displacement, or conflicts could create new vulnerabilities. Devex will be following how these all come together as global issues. Stay tuned to Devex.com for this and much more during the World Humanitarian Summit.